uncomfortable about the process whereby people who were accused of crimes are put out into the public domain, and it seems, in the modern environment, there's almost an assumption that they're guilty, and it's up to them to prove their innocence. And that has made me really, really concerned. The first case was 22-year-old Liam Allen, accused of multiple rapes, and his name out there in the public domain. And then it turned out that the police perhaps had not done a particularly brilliant job of this, and the case was dropped. And the other case, an extraordinary case, about a bishop called George Bell, someone who's a bit of a hero in the Church of England, and he seemed to be damned by the Church of England as a result of some claims that were made nearly 4 decades after he died. So I've been really concerned about this presumption of innocence before guilt, about perhaps the need to have legislation to give those that are accused of these crimes anonymity, at least until they're charged, or perhaps even after that. And so I'm sort of asking really this morning, do we need some legislation that actually protects the anonymity of those against whom these kind of claims are made? Please let me know what you think. You can do so by calling 0345 6060 973. You can text to 84850. You can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. You can watch us on Facebook and comment there too. Now, earlier on today, I spoke to Liberal Democrat peer Lord Carlisle. He's a former independent reviewer of British anti-terrorism laws, and he was the author of a report into the Bishop George Bell case. And I asked Lord Carlisle to explain why the Bishop Bell case is so significant.
Bishop Bell died in 1958. He was the Bishop of Chichester and a very much admired churchman who has a name day named after him in the Church of England calendar, which means he's the nearest thing to a saint that the Church of England has. In 1995, 37 years after his death, a woman complained that he had sexually abused her when she had, on a number of occasions, been present in the Bishop's Palace in Chichester in about the late 1940s. The church disgracefully did nothing about that complaint, and it lay dormant until 2013, when she resumed her complaint. The church then rather slowly started doing something about it, and eventually they formed a core group which considered the case. On the 22nd of October 2015, the church issued a public apology in which basically it said that it had found that Bishop Bell had abused her, and they paid her some money in compensation, albeit without an admission of liability. Thus, the reputation of Bishop Bell was destroyed. There were protests by people who support the memory of Bishop Bell. He died childless, and his widow died later. Eventually, the Church of England decided to hold an independent review of the way the case has been dealt with. I conducted that independent review, and my report was published on Friday. I made recommendations which included that where there was no admission of liability, in other words, there was no finding of guilt, whether to the criminal or civil standard, after a proper inquiry, then the perpetrator's name should remain anonymous, save in exceptional circumstances, just like the complainant's name, because it would not have been found that he was in fact a perpetrator at all. He was simply an alleged perpetrator. I also found that the inquiry into the Bell case conducted by the Church of England fell very far short of due process. I uncovered very easily some evidence that they hadn't even looked for. And so I was critical of the Church of England, which has accepted most, but not all of my recommendations. Whatever happened to the presumption of innocence before guilt in cases like this? Well, I think that, first of all, the core group, as it was called, that considered the case, suffered from oversteer as a result of a preconception that George Bell must be guilty. And the woman concerned was the only person who's ever made a complaint against Bishop Bell. And secondly, they failed to have, within the core group, independent specialist advice which understood the criminal law because although it was a potential civil case, no actual case was ever brought, nevertheless, the allegation that was being made was a very serious criminal allegation, and it would have been of importance to the core group to know whether a criminal case would have had any chance of success, which, by the way, it would not.
Now, following on from this historic case, there are also a number of current cases, a very big rape case which ended this week. I mean, has the pendulum throughout our criminal justice system, and I know there have been some terrible examples of sexual abuse that have been uncovered over the course of the last few years. One thinks of the Jimmy Savile case and others like that. But has the pendulum swung too far in favour of the accuser?
I think it has. The Church of England in the Bell case made the mistake of describing her throughout as the victim or survivor, whereas in fact she was always the complainant because no finding had been made against Bishop Bell. And if you'll forgive me, Nigel, there is one word you use that I don't agree with, in which you described the rape case as a very big case. If the accused, who suffered a huge injustice, will forgive me for saying so, actually it was a very ordinary rape case in which an ordinary person, unknown to the general public, found himself facing an accusation of rape for 2 years with his name available in the public media, and because the police and apparently the Crown Prosecution Service failed to disclose material to the defence, which was absolutely fundamental, and as prosecuting counsel Jerry Hayes demonstrated, brought the case to an immediate end. So that's a shocking situation.
No, it is a shocking situation. But throughout this 2-year period, did that young 22-year-old man deserve a right to anonymity?
In my view, yes. There are possible exceptions that I can foresee, but in an ordinary case in which there is an allegation of a serious sexual offence with no concern that there had been other victims, in my view, there should be anonymity at least until charge. Now, that wouldn't have helped in this particular case, but it would help a lot of other people. And there could be exceptions where, for example, there was a genuine fear that there were numerous other victims.
Yes.
If a case is exceptional, that decision should be made by a circuit judge or recorder who is qualified to try serious sex cases. There is a special qualification for this, which a very large number of very good judges at various levels have. As to this case, the real injustice in this case is a most abject failure of the police and possibly the Crown Prosecution Service to look at, understand and disclose key material that undermine the prosecution case. And I regard those failures as being gross misconduct, which could be the subject of disciplinary action, whether it's in the police or in the CPS.
So to get this balance right again, Lord Carlisle, do we need changes in legislation or just changes in practice and procedure?
We need both. We need a change in legislation to enshrine in law a general right to anonymity for people who are accused of serious sexual offences, subject to exceptionality in the sort of case I briefly described. And we need a very fundamental change in procedure so that the police, and if it be the case that the prosecution knew, the CPS, cannot sit on the material that in the case we were been talking about actually demonstrated the innocence of the accused, didn't merely undermine the prosecution case.
Well, I have to say, I completely agree with Lord Carlisle. I'm not normally somebody who argues for more legislation. I generally argue for fewer laws controlling our life and our society, but I do think the argument here that we do need a piece of legislation that protects the anonymity of those accused of sexual offences, I now think we need it. I believe it is something that should be debated in the run-up to the next general election so that the big parties can at least themselves have a public debate on this issue. It is nothing to do with attempting to cover up historic wrongs or current wrongs, but it is an argument that so many people are being falsely accused of actually two wrongs not making a right. I think it would be a fairer and better thing to do. And yes, as Lord Carlisle said, if there was a suspicion from the police, from the Crown Prosecution Service, that an individual who was accused wasn't just being accused by one individual, but being accused by a lot of people, then maybe there was an argument then to publish the name to see if more people come forward. And I do understand that, but he was very clear that that decision should be put before a judge to ensure we get this right, to ensure that actually this is fair, that this is done properly. Richard is calling from Esher in Surrey. What do you think, Richard, having listened to Lord Carlisle's arguments?
Yes, hello there.
Good morning.
I don't know. I don't put things as eloquently as you might. I tend to agree that it's very unfair that the perpetrator of the crime is named, and quite often things are leaked before the case has been heard, and
yes.
There's this air of guilt and that can stay with people for life. I mean, this is obviously completely unfair. But I'm not a man to deal with law, but so much seems to come to a layman like myself that it's common sense. If there was some sort of consequence for making fake allegations, and I mean there are an awful lot of completely fake allegations. This does no good for anybody. This then puts a presumption of fake allegations on genuine cases. It ruins it for everybody. If there was some sort of consequence for these fake allegations, some of them very obvious, then less allegations will be made, and it would save everybody's time and money. It just seems to be a lot of this could be dealt with common sense.
Yeah, so
I'm not advocate of more laws and more legislation if things can be dealt with a lot more swiftly. And if there was penalties for making fake allegations, then less allegations will be made.
I think, Richard, you made a very good point, that those that make false allegations that not only are damaging and injurious to the accused, but also eat up a vast amount of police and court time, there should be a better system of punishments in place. Richard from Esher in Surrey, I thank you for that point. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 11:15. So following the case of Liam Allen, he's the 22-year-old who was accused of multiple rapes. This all went to trial. His name was out there in the public domain. It turned out in this case, actually, that the police perhaps had not done their job as thoroughly as they ought to have done. And when the barrister, Jerry Hayes, representing this young man, asked for some police evidence, including text messages, the whole case fell to pieces. But it does raise this much bigger question of, do people who are accused of these kind of sexual crimes deserve anonymity? And are we actually treating them as if they're innocent until proven guilty, or have we sort of moved? Is it almost a little bit as if we've reversed that burden of proof? And that's what's been worrying me for some time. And this week, what with that case and the Bishop Bell case, which Lord Carlisle spoke about so eloquently before the break, I do think the time has come, not just for a change in practices of police, Crown Prosecution Services and courts, but I do actually think a little bit of legislation perhaps is needed. And interestingly, Angela Rafferty, who's the chairwoman of the Criminal Bar Association, she said on Friday that the theory that everyone who reports a sex offence must be a victim may unconsciously have led the police and Crown Prosecution Service into giving complaints not the impartial, in-depth scrutiny that is essential to avoid the kind of injustice that nearly befell young Mr. Allen. So, yes, of course, as a society, we do want to take seriously some of the awful abuses that took place in the past, that no longer do we want institutions to brush them under the carpet. And it's true that churches and state-run organisations did brush much of this under the carpet. We do want the truth about these things. But equally, as I try to say before the break myself, two wrongs don't make a right. And if somebody is falsely accused of one of these crimes, why on earth should that be in the public domain? That's how I feel quite strongly about this. I wonder what Bruce, who's calling from Hampton Court, thinks. Good morning, Bruce.
Oh, hi, Nigel. Firstly, I'd just like to say thank you for Brexit and the chance to get out of the EU. But let's move on to the matter at hand.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this practice of the police to withhold evidence until the last possible second is extremely common. It's a standard tactic. If they think they've got their man, they'll do it.
Why will they do it, Bruce?
Well, obviously, firstly to aid their case, but in other words, to allow a defence to really not have enough time to get a case together. And it seems to me that this new prosecution lawyer, when he found this out, was utterly disgusted about it.
Yes.
And I have not first-hand experience of it, I have second-hand experience of this in a case that is known to me. So it is a very, very common tactic, and it just needs to be stopped, because it can wreck people's lives that are accused of serious things for years. Okay,
so you think the police need to change their approach to this, Bruce, yeah?
Well, I think that police that deliberately withhold information are not currently being held accountable and should be personally held accountable.
Yeah, okay. No, I think, look, Bruce, I have framed this debate around the need for a piece of legislation, but I'm not suggesting that is the be-all and end-all. How the police operate, how the CPS operate, what the court procedures are, all of those things are relevant and are true, and I thank you very much for your call. The argument that was being made, Lord Carlisle made it, is if there is any genuine ground for suspicion that more people may be involved, then there was an argument for the anonymity of the individual being dropped. Becky on Twitter takes a different view. She says, can't more potential victims come forward after someone has been convicted and they can then get their own trial? Becky, it's a very, very powerful point, although I suspect that in many cases people would rather, in a situation like this, be on a list with 5 or 10 other people than be out there and exposed on their own. Because, for anybody, the accuser or the accused, going through a trial is a pretty gruelling, frightening thing for anyone to go through. Michael is calling from Penge in South London. Good morning, Michael.
Hi, good morning. I think one of the issues we haven't touched on yet is the role of social media, because you can forget about any notion of innocent until proven guilty. I mean, the internet, or the social media, I should say, is judge, jury, and executioner. I mean, there are cases of particularly young people having committed suicide as a result of allegations online. And I think there is, in my view, scope for legislation to deal with this matter. And I think what we need to look at is the role of social media companies, looking at Google, Facebook, Twitter, etc., and redefining them as publishers. Now, I don't know at the moment whether we can do that under EU law, but I think Britain can become a world leader in this and actually take a lead in defining these organisations as publishers. And therefore, the usual checks and balances that apply to other forms of media would be applicable to those organisations. And I think that would help to deal with a lot of this malicious falsehood which is spread online and which destroys lives. No,
Michael, I would not for one moment downplay the significance or importance of what you've said. I mean, goodness me, if I just look at the things that have been said about me on social media, I mean, it's unbelievable. And you notice now that anyone that puts their head over the parapet, whatever side of the argument they're on, but anyone that puts their head over the parapet in modern politics starts to get trolled, starts to get vile and violent abuse online, so and all sorts of weird false accusations. So I do understand that, Michael. I mean, what I was specifically talking about was when the authorities, charge somebody or investigate somebody, that's when it goes absolutely mad. And social media, of course, is part of spreading and perhaps conflating that situation. But I wonder, Michael, when you raise this whole point, how on earth, and I don't want to be negative for one moment, but how on earth do we police something as vast as the internet?
Well, I think you'd have to employ people. I mean, it would cost money, obviously. I mean, the internet can be a great thing, but I mean, if you have to have moderators to deal with this sort of thing, then that would be a means to deal with it. I don't underestimate the challenge, but I think it's equally as important as the other points. Your other contributors,
because it's ruining people's lives, and it's driving teenagers to suicide and all the rest of it. No, Michael,
doing all that sort of thing.
Yeah. No, Michael, understood. It's a valid point. Gosh, it's a tough one to answer. As I understand it, the police force already increasingly are spending time, money, and human resources on dealing with all sorts of hate crimes and all sorts of nastiness that goes on the internet. I suspect, to completely police it, I shudder to think of the kind of resources we would actually need. Stephen is calling from Hyde Park in central London. Good morning, Stephen.
Hello, Nigel. A worried Brexiteer on the line.
Yes, well, there's quite a few of us around this Sunday morning, Stephen, I can assure.
I'm losing sleep. Yes, I'd just like to expand on the police issue, because the police in any criminal case, they use a concept called a pattern. And, they try and establish guilt through past behaviour. Well, if one turns that on themselves, if they spotlight themselves, think through recent history, the cases where they have withheld information, very famous cases where innocent people have been adjudicated to, or at worst, gone through a lifetime of hell trying to obtain justice. So it's a pattern with the police of withholding. It's not these individual single cases. They are purposely doing this. The problem being that if you've ever had an encounter with specifically the Metropolitan Police, the Complaints Commission, the method by which we can redress any perceived injustice is a farce. There is nothing there for an individual to stop it as it begins. One has to go through a process that they are in complete control of.
Yes, I mean, complaints to any level of authority are always a problem, whether it's you try and sue a hospital or even the BBC or whoever it might be. It is always difficult. Stephen, I do understand, and you're the second caller talking about the way the police operate, their modus operandi. Would you agree with my bigger point that perhaps a little piece of legislation that does protect the anonymity of the individual is the right thing to do?
Well, I absolutely, and in fact, I would go further. I wouldn't limit it to sexual crimes or rape crimes. I would enforce anonymity for any crime. Yes. Where the public interest perhaps is not in question, because it immediately puts in the modern day social media environment a perception, and you have to undo that perception before you even begin.
And it affects people through the whole of their life, through work and everything else. Stephen, I thank you for your call. The one element to this we haven't yet discussed is the role of the press, because for this to work, the press would need to cooperate fully with it, and perhaps that's worthy of further discussion too. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 11:30. Are those who are accused of sexual crimes entitled to anonymity? And that really is a major debate following the collapse of a rape case earlier on this week, and indeed a very critical report into the way the Church of England has dealt with the legacy of Bishop George Bell, and all of that explained earlier by Lord Carlisle on this show. Dave on Facebook says, anyone found guilty of making false claims against someone should receive the sentence that the accused would have if found guilty. Well, Dave, that's not going to happen, but you're not the first person to think that those that make false allegations perhaps should be dealt with a little more strictly. Common sense from Lord Carlisle. Wolf criers need to be put on the register, named and shamed, says James on Twitter. So that is a sort of familiar theme that is coming through. I've had the same. An ex accused me when my barrister produced evidence, i.e. letters, that contact was consented. A notice of discontinuance came after I had been publicly tried, and that comes from somebody anonymously. Well, that's rather what happened in this rape case, is that there was a lot of evidence that was not put before the court. It got to the court shortly before the end of the trial because Jerry Hayes, the barrister, asked the police for it. And as soon as that was produced, the judge threw out the whole case and was disgusted with the conduct of it. So just producing legislation that protects people's anonymity is not going to solve all of these problems, but it might go some way towards righting some of the wrongs. That at least is what I think. I wonder what Tony, who's calling from Notting Hill this morning, thinks. Hello.
Hi, Nige. Firstly, I'd just like to say thanks very much for Brexit. It was great to take our country.
Well, there's a bit more work to do on that, Tony, but that's a debate. For another day. What I'm talking about here, Tony, is, I do understand that we have righted some wrongs of the past in the last couple of years because of too many cases of sexual abuse of minors was frankly brushed under the carpet. But I'm worried that the pendulum may have gone too far the other way, Tony.
Sure. I mean, basically, I think that we should get onto the real issues here, which is, of course, September the 11th was clearly an inside job, Nigel. Your thoughts?
No. We're not discussing anything like that. I am discussing whether people deserve anonymity.
Who did create the pyramids? Because it's clearly aliens.
No, Tony, I'm sorry, mate. It might be fun for you on a Sunday morning, but I think he really, frankly, bore a lot of other people. I wonder what Simon in Seaford in East Sussex thinks. Good morning, Simon.
Hello there, Nigel. Nice to speak to you.
Yeah, good morning. Nice to speak to you. So, Simon, it's complicated, isn't it? Because on the one hand, I'm calling for people to have their anonymity. I'm worried about what gets said online and how we control that. I'm worried about the press because they'll say it's a matter of public interest. I mean, even though I'm putting this idea forward, it's not straightforward, is it?
It's not, and the problem that I think we've got is the fact that people now are getting trial by media. The fact that the pretense that you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, you're not. And one of the main points I said, and this will throw a cat amongst the pigeons, whether the man did it or whether he didn't, and from what we're led to believe he did do it, Jimmy Savile has never been found guilty in a court of law in this country of any sexual crimes whatsoever.
That is true, Simon, because this all emerged after he died, didn't it?
It did, and as I said, so he's had a trial by media. People have had all their compensation through it as well.
Yes.
His entire estate went on compensation. Now, I'm not saying that whether the man did or whether he didn't do it. All I'm saying is, on a legal perspective, we are getting a trial by media in this country.
But there's almost a counter-argument here, Simon, isn't there? That if the media hadn't done what they did, we might never have known the truth about Jimmy Savile.
Yeah, but I think the police tend to do this on a lot of cases as well, Nigel, where they just put the name out into the public domain to try and build a case against somebody because they haven't got enough actual evidence.
Right, so punt it out. So Simon, what you're saying is they punt it out there to see what comes back.
Yes, I think it's a glorified fishing trip, I think.
Interesting. I'd be very interested to get any phone calls from serving or ex-police officers, anonymously, obviously, who would perhaps back up or not the point that Simon has just made. So, Simon, if we did put a piece of legislation in place to protect the anonymity of the individual, at what point would it be fair for the press to get involved and start talking about this then?
When the person's been convicted of the offence.
When they've been convicted. So that would make, effectively, the trial of these people would have to happen in camera and be totally confidential.
Well, I don't think that the case has to be in camera. I just think that there ought to be reporting restrictions on it. I don't see why the members of the public shouldn't be.
OK, so restrictions in... OK, report the case, but protect the identities of the accuser and the accused, yeah?
Yeah, because the accused, the accuser always gets their anonymity.
Yes, I know.
Even when it's proved that they've made false claims, they still remain anonymous, and yet the damage has been done to the person that's been accused of the crime. Yeah,
and several callers, Simon, saying there needs to be a register. People got to go on this register, be named and shamed, certainly if they're repeat offenders. Simon, interesting points you've made there. Colin in Kings Langley is my next caller. Good morning, Colin.
Hi, good morning. Yes, I've got a couple of points. Number one, obviously, I'm a great believer that you're innocent until proved guilty. And nothing else is said. Effectively, what that should mean is that we need to have open court systems so people can see that justice is being served correctly, but you shouldn't have to name individuals until after the conviction. And I think that's only right and proper to protect all parties. But more importantly, in this case in particular, the 2006 Fraud Act makes it very clear that any misrepresentation of fact is a fraud. And that misrepresentation can be implied. In other words, the police telling the prosecution service that there was nothing of relevance. That's effectively a fraud if there was something of relevance. And it can also be by omission. So by failing to disclose information that should be relevant to any transaction, whatever, is also a fraud. So
right.
Again, I can see that there is a case for certain individuals in this matter to answer criminally for their actions under the Fraud Act 2006.
And does it ever happen, Colin?
Well, there's another story. If it was used as it was designed to be used, i.e. for the catch-all act, it's a bit like if you cross a zebra crossing where there's a pedestrian on it and you're caught by a police officer, it doesn't matter the fact that you didn't have time to stop or anything else, the offence is committed, same as a parking offence, realistically.
Yeah.
Absolute sort of, what's the word? Absolute sort of charges, if you like. And if it was used as it could be used, a lot less people would defraud people because it's so easy to catch them with it because the wording is such, it wasn't worded to catch the police for misrepresenting or anybody else. If you said you had 4 O-levels and you've only got 2, you get a job because you've got 4 O-levels, effectively you defrauded your employer. You see?
Yeah. No, I understand that, Colin. I understand that. I mean, I'm just really interested in what happens to those who make false accusations, who cost the police and the courts not just money, but a huge amount of time that could be better spent. And I just wonder whether we ever catch up with people who behave like this.
Well, we've got the Fraud Act 2006. You don't need to pass a new act. The Fraud Act makes it very clear. If they do,
okay, so in your view, Colin, we should use it, yeah?
We should be using it. We should be using it a lot more.
No, Colin, fair point. Very interesting. Thank you. I'm going to go to Tom, which is an assumed name, who's calling me from East Sussex. Tom, good morning.
Hello there. How you doing?
Okay, so what do you think? I mean, I'm arguing that we need, in nearly all cases, anonymity for this whole process to be fair. How do you feel about that, Tom?
Well, total anonymity, I can't really put a point on that, but I will say that if someone accuses somebody of being a paedophile or a sex offender, they should not have any type of anonymity because they're the accuser. I can't speak for the accused because although I've been accused that way, I certainly didn't get any anonymity. It was in the middle of the street. And when I called the police myself and said, look, I chased the guy to where he lived, they suggested I had a guilty conscience. But when I complained again, I was told that nothing's going to happen. I was threatened with arrest because I was being aggressive after he accused me of this, which you can imagine he would be at 9:30 in the morning in a street. To have someone suddenly say, you effing paedophile, seeing your name in the paper, blah, you like little people and blah, etc., etc. And I had no idea who this guy was. Mm. He later said to the police that he had no idea, he'd never seen me before. Now, I wanted him prosecuted. There is no, apparently there is no law that if you call someone a paedophile, you get arrested. You call someone a puff or a gay or a religious insult, you'll get arrested. But you can call someone a sex offender. Obviously, you can.
Yeah, okay.
Of course, if I'd have been a public...
Well, Tom, let's not try to offend anybody here this morning with what we're doing, and the words you've just used might upset some people, but they really might. But Tom, this incident happened in the street. Did it cause you beyond short-term shock and horror? Did it cause you any material harm beyond that?
It caused me a lot of mentally harm because I live in a very small place. And I had to walk down these streets while this whole thing was going on.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind that the police spent time looking at me over this.
Yeah.
Okay, there's no doubt at all. I invited them around. I said, you better come around and check. I told all my neighbours about it. Like, it was a stupid thing to do. the police said you should have kept it to yourself. I said, if I kept it to myself and he just spread the rumour quietly, then people would be pointing at me. So I went round shouting about it as loud as I could.
So Tom, you feel...
I couldn't... The point I'm making is, Nigel, I couldn't get him brought to court for alleging this.
No. And he had anonymity as well.
Totally.
Yeah. So, Tom, do we need anonymity for both sides of these disputes, or for neither?
For neither.
For neither. Fine.
If you're innocent, you've got nothing to worry about. If you're guilty, then you're...
No, Tom, you've made a very, very, very different, unique point. Tom feeling, actually, anonymity doesn't work anyway, but the accuser should be prepared to have their name out there, and he cites his own case that happened to him on the streets. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 11:45. A week in which people who've been falsely accused of sexual crime has been very much in the news, and that is not an attempt at all by me or this show or LBC to say we should cover anything up. But I do begin to think that people deserve the right of anonymity in these cases. After all, the accuser does have anonymity. Also, some big questions here about the way in which the police and the courts operate, particularly after the case 22-year-old Liam Allen, who goes through a long rape trial, and right at the end, some evidence that the police had is disclosed and the case is thrown out. This is not simple, it's not easy. I'm going to William, who's a former police officer in Newcastle. Good morning.
Good morning. I don't know where you got the idea. I'm a former police officer, but my brother-in-law is causing me sergeant for fun.
Right.
But anyway, all right. Anyway, where the hell did I get that from? Anyway, hello?
Yes, I'm listening.
Yeah, I just heard a funny buzzing. Now, the thing is, I think there should be a new law, a new crime of false rape accusation.
Yes.
Now, that does not mean that if it fails in court, that the woman is automatically guilty of that. There'd have to be a separate trial, and it would have to be shown that she deliberately lied for some sort of gain, for spite, for money, and so on. And there should be a register of false rape accusers, because I don't know if you know this, but there are quite a lot of serial false accusers out there. And so if it comes to trial, the judge will know if it's a false accuser in front of the court and so on. And I think it's very important, this, because what's happening is there's so many false accusations buzzing around that the police are tired of dealing with them, and they cannot give the proper attention to the genuine rape cases.
Yeah, so... again, you're another one suggesting, William, and we've had several this morning, there needs to be a register of people that have made accusations that have turned out to be false, so that next time, on the basis of cry wolf, we don't take them so seriously, yeah?
Yes, I think so, yes.
Right, OK. I wonder, William, thank you very much indeed for that call. You've got to have anonymity because it could influence the jury, I'm told, of course. On text. Well, remember the O.J. Simpson case. Very difficult for them to find any jury in America who hadn't already made up their mind to some degree as to whether they thought O.J. Simpson was innocent or was guilty. Tom is calling me from Crawley. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Nigel. Nice to speak to you.
Good, nice to speak to you. So tell me about your experiences of this.
So basically, I was accused of rape, falsely accused, obviously, and I was arrested from my workplace in front of all my colleagues, and I was arrested handcuffed, obviously, and it was humiliating. Plus, they did after taking my statement and everything, because I had no criminal record whatsoever, so they did send me out on bail after like 8 to 10 hours in custody. But the important thing is I wasn't able to enter the county for 6 months where I worked and lived.
What, you were... So there was an exclusion order placed on you, was there?
Yes, because she was residing in that county.
Yes.
So I wasn't allowed to enter until the investigation was complete, which took 6 months.
Yeah. And what happened to your career, Tom, work-wise?
I had to find another job.
Gosh. Yeah. That is very, very tough. And in terms of in terms of the accusations that were made, this obviously never went to trial.
Never, of course. They didn't find any evidence after 6 months of investigation, and there was no physical evidence at the time of the arrest as well.
And
And
the person that made the accusations, I mean, are these accusations, do you know whether you're the only person that this person has accused?
Actually, it was my ex-wife. She made the accusation on the day I got separated out of spite.
So you say it was done purely out of spite?
Exactly.
And what do you think, Tom, should happen to her?
Well, it's very hard. It's very difficult because I know there are some people out who are making the accusations who are really victims.
Yes.
So I don't want to say that they should be treated harshly, but I should only say that you shouldn't treat someone like a criminal unless you have a very hard evidence, like how I was treated.
Yeah, well, I think, Tom, this is the whole debate, isn't it? And you know, when I spoke earlier on about Angela Rafferty, the chairwoman of the Criminal Bar Association, you know, she's made this point that the pendulum has gone too far the other way, and there is too much of a presumption now that the person that makes the complaint is considered to be a victim, and the person against whom the complaint is made is seen to be a perpetrator. And we kind of, Tom, it's almost as if we've kind of lost that balance that actually people should be presumed innocent until they're found guilty. And I'm afraid you're someone that fell into that trap. Tom from Crawley, I thank you very much for that call. And as Tom said, you know, we don't want to stop people coming forwards, telling the truth about bad things that happen, because that may well protect other people. But in Tom's case, if what Tom said was right, that this accusation was done to spite him, not only was it deeply embarrassing and hurtful for him at the time, and it cost him his job, as he explained, but just how much time, police time and money was spent over that 6-month period to get nowhere. And I think, you know, these are real questions about police resources. I wonder what Sadiq from Gatwick thinks. Good morning, Sadiq.
Hello there, Nigel.
Good morning.
Not your biggest fan, by the way, but however, that's another day.
Well, that's all. Well, that's all right, Sadiq. That's fine. The whole point.
Yeah.
Do you know the whole point about proper democratic debate, and why I think LBC, as a radio station, does so well, is that it allows people with completely different points of view to debate things in a grown-up, sensible manner.
Exactly, correctly. Well, you know, the question you're asking,
yeah.
I do think, obviously, I think there's some cases where you might need to put the person's name out there. But generally, I think it should be something that should be considered, something they shouldn't do. For instance, there's some people who I know who have been accused of such, and even though they've been found not guilty in court, people still refer to them as, oh, there's that guy who was accused of rape. And that is a name that sticks. You know, that guy who was accused of rape.
So had he been protected, Sadiq, by anonymity, that wouldn't occur, would it?
That wouldn't have happened. You know, however, as I said like earlier, you know, previously, that there are some people who, or some cases, which you might need to put the name out there just to to help with the case in terms of having, or possibly bringing more witnesses further forward.
Yeah. And this point, Sadiq, Lord Kalar made this point, didn't he? You know, the interview I did with him earlier on at the top of the hour, he made the point that there could be public interest cases where it makes sense for a name to be out there because that helps gather more evidence. His point was that if the accusation that was made against somebody was made by one individual and there was no history of this, that in that case he absolutely agreed that anonymity should be granted.
That's correct, and I believe, you know, I totally agree with that statement. But of course, the impact it causes when someone is not guilty is one which unfortunately can't be reversed, or can't. I don't think there's an amount of compensation that can take a name out of the mud, so to speak, or clean
No. But the other problem, Sadiq, of course, in the modern world, is that if somebody, you know, even if they're being protected through the legal system, through anonymity, difficult to stop people saying things on social media now, isn't it?
Of course. social media, of course, is just like I don't think we as a society have got to the stage where we can monitor it or stop it in certain instances. You know, names flying around, and you know, I mean, we're all in the social media age now.
I think it's very, very difficult. It's very difficult. Sadiq, I thank you for your call, and I look forward to you ringing me on a subject where we vehemently disagree. I've got time for one last caller. I haven't got long, Paul. I know it's not your real name, from South London. You've got 45 seconds, Paul. That's it.
Yeah, basically, this thing. I think it's terrible. I mean, something similar happened to myself. I was a teacher for 7 years, and I had a couple of things said about me behind my back, the worst things that were said by ex-school friends going back 20 years who were purely jealous that I'd done well in life, in different areas in life since. And I was traumatised for years because of that. So I reported it to the police, and I think that is absolutely disgusting. That people can say things, absolutely traumatise people, and then there's nothing you can do. I mean, I have the emails that I sent to the police station, etc., so I've covered myself.
Yes.
But it's absolutely terrible. I mean, I still work in education now. I mean, just people from years ago.
So really, Paul, this keeps coming back, doesn't it? That in some ways, and if somebody makes one false accusation, that's one thing. But if somebody repeatedly makes false accusations against others, we do need some mechanism of dealing with this. Paul, I thank you. I'm sorry for the hurt that you've been through. It's one of the toughest subjects you can ever debate. Whatever you do, even if you do protect people's anonymity, social media is out there. No easy answers. You've been listening to The Nigel Farage Show. I'm back tomorrow evening at 7 from Washington, D.C. Coming up at 3 o'clock this afternoon, it's Alex Salmond. But up next, it's Majid Nawaz.
Thank you, Nigel. We were considering having a whip around for you.